Westernspring Television. Ours it is.
Good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Westernspring Television. Now the headlines. Osun State High Court sentences hotel owner Ramon Adedoyin and two others to death over murder of OAU master's student Timothy Adegoke. Russia accuses Ukraine of launching early morning drone attack in Moscow. NATO condemns attacks by demonstrators in Kosovo, which left at least 30 peacekeepers injured. My name is Evelyn Ohiola, and we'll begin in Osun State as an Osun State High Court in Osogbo has sentenced the owner of Hilton Hotel, Ile-Ife, Ramon Adedoyin, and two others to death by hanging over the murder case of Timothy Adegoke, a master's student of the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. Adegoke died in controversial circumstances at Hilton Hotel owned by Adedoyin in November 2021. Delivering the judgment, Chief Judge of Osun State, Justice Adekbele Ojo, found Adedoyin, Adeniyi, and Aderogba, and also Kazeem Oyetunde guilty of the charges against them and were sentenced to death by hanging. They were also sentenced to serve different years of jail terms for other offenses committed, such as conspiracy and unlawful interference with the deceased's body in an attempt to cover up the murder. Justice Ojo also said Adedoyin's decision not to enter the witness box meant he agreed to the murder charge pressed against him by the prosecution. The Chief Judge, however, discharged and acquitted three other defendants, Kule Adebayo, Lawrence Oluwole, and Magdalene Chifuna, of all charges against them. After the plea to temper justice with mercy by both the defense and prosecution counsel on behalf of the seventh defendant, Adedeji Adeshola, who was found guilty of altering records, Justice Ojo adjourned till tomorrow for our sentencing. As part of the judgment, Justice Ojo held that the Hilux vehicle, which was used by the accused persons to convey the body of Adegoke to where he was buried, as well as the hotel belonging to Adedoyin, should be forfeited to the state. She also held that late Adegoke's children's education be placed on the sponsorship of Adedoyin's estate up to the completion of university education. The judge then declared wanted Adedoyin's son, Rahim Adedoyin, who was the managing director of the hotel and reportedly supervised the dumping of Adegoke's body in a shallow grave before it was recovered by the police.
In the case of the first, third, and fifth defendants, they've been charged for conspiracy to commit murder and murder as well. But that of the seventh defendant, she was only convicted for altering records, and her sentencing had been further adjourned to tomorrow. But that of the first defendant, the third defendant, and the fifth defendant, let me mention their names. The first defendant is Dr. Raymond Adedoyin, and he has been convicted for conspiracy to commit murder and murder, among other counts preferred against him. The third defendant is Adeniyi Aderogba. He was the manager of the hotel. He was the one that admitted that himself, Rahim Adedoyin, who is now at large, the fifth defendant, evacuated the dead body of the late Timothy Adegoke from the hotel, from room 305 where he was lodged, and evacuated it and dumped him at Ede Road. They both admitted, and they were convicted for their various roles in the entire case. So the fifth defendant is Oyetunde Kazeem. He was also a money manager as well in the same hotel. So the three of them, including the seventh defendant, have been convicted for conspiracy to commit murder and murder.
The second defendant and the fourth defendant was actually discharged and acquitted, of course, you know, and the fifth defendant was convicted.
What's the next plan?
Yeah, in line with the provisions of the law, we will consult with our clients and take the necessary steps.
Officials of the Department of State Services, DSS, today stamped the Lagos State Office of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, claiming ownership of the building located on Awolowo Road in Lagos. It was gathered that the DSS officials barricaded the entrance with armored personnel carriers and prevented the EFCC officials from gaining access. In a statement, EFCC's head of media and publicity said the development was strange to the commission given that its officials have cohabited with the DSS in that facility for 20 years without any incident. But in its reaction, the DSS said it was only occupying its own facility where it is carrying out its official and statutory responsibility. DSS spokesperson Peter Afunaya said there is no rivalry between the service and the EFCC over anything. Vice President Kashim Shettima has affirmed the commitment of the President Bola Tinubu's administration on removal of fuel subsidy. He said this while speaking to State House correspondents after he resumed work at the Vice President wing of the State House in Abuja. He restated President Tinubu's commitment to better the lives of Nigerians. President Tinubu had in his inaugural address yesterday said petrol subsidy would be removed by his administration, a comment that has caused racketeering and panic buying in the supply chain of the product. Outside Nigeria, Russia has accused Ukraine of launching an early morning drone attack on Moscow, the first time the city has been targeted by multiple drones since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Defense Ministry said Kyiv staged a terrorist attack with at least 8 drones causing minor damage, while President Vladimir Putin said the drone attack was aimed at civilian targets. Ukraine has denied the attack.
Has accused Ukraine of launching a series of early morning drone attacks on Moscow, the first time the city has been targeted by multiple drones since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Russian capital and its surrounding areas were targeted by rare drone attacks on Tuesday morning, causing minor damage to buildings and no casualties, Moscow's mayor Sergei Sobyanin says. The Russian Defense Ministry said that Kyiv had staged a terrorist attack using at least 8 drones, while officials said that minor damage had been caused to several buildings. Since Russia sent troops into Ukraine in February last year, the war has largely been fought inside Ukraine, though Moscow has reported some attacks on its territory and said one was an assassination attempt against President Vladimir Putin. Wagner Group founder Yevgeny Prigozhin blamed the drone attack on Moscow on senior military officials living in Moscow's exclusive Rublyovka suburb. Ukraine has denied carrying out the drone strikes. Presidential aide Mikhailo Podolyak said that Kyiv was not directly involved in the Moscow attacks, but that Ukraine had enjoyed watching events unfold and predicted an increase in attacks. With Russian troops occupying some eastern Ukrainian regions, the war has killed tens of thousands, uprooted millions, reduced cities to ruins, and caused havoc in the global economy. Temitope Ajijalaluola, Westernspring Television News.
In the meantime, Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki has landed in Moscow for a 4-day official visit to Russia at the invitation of President Vladimir Putin. Eritrea and Russia enjoy cordial relations, and Eritrea is one of the few countries that has voted against United Nations resolutions condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. President Isaias, who recently returned from an official visit to China, has ruled Eritrea since it won independence from neighboring Ethiopia in 1993. Mr. Isaias was greeted at the airport on his arrival by Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who is currently on African tour that started in Kenya yesterday, visited Eritrea in January. Meanwhile, South Africa's foreign minister has granted diplomatic immunity to foreign officials attending the BRICS summit in August and a meeting for BRICS foreign ministers this coming week. The BRICS alliance represents some of the world's leading emerging economies, including Russia, China, Brazil, and India. Local media said this could potentially open the door for Russian President Vladimir Putin to attend the August gathering in South Africa. The International Criminal Court, ICC, issued an arrest warrant in March for the Russian president for alleged war crimes in Ukraine. As a signatory to the ICC's Rome Statute, South Africa is expected to enforce the warrant and arrest Mr. Putin. But South Africa's spokesperson for the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Clayson Monyela, tweeted that such immunities were standard when a country hosted an international conference or summit. In the United States, 9 people have been wounded in a shooting on a crowded beach in Florida over the Memorial Day holiday. The shooting yesterday evening unfolded on the Hollywood Oceanfront Boardwalk, a popular area for beachgoers 20 miles north of Miami. Police said shots broke out during an altercation between 2 groups. Those injured range in age from 1 to 65, and the wounded includes 4 children. Police spokesperson Diana Betsnecki said 1 person was arrested and authorities continue to search for a second suspect. Hollywood Police Chief Chris O'Brien told reporters that thousands of people were in the area at the time of the incident and dozens of police officers responded to the shooting. Wildfires in the Atlantic Canadian province of Nova Scotia has destroyed homes and caused thousands of people to evacuate. As of yesterday, around 16,400 people have been forced to leave their homes near Halifax, Nova Scotia's largest city. The region has seen over 100 more wildfires than last year, fueled by drier than normal conditions. Evacuation orders have also been issued in British Columbia as fires continue to blaze in the country's west. Halifax Fire Deputy Chief Dave Meldrum told journalists that the fast-moving wildfire, which began on Sunday, is ongoing and still not under control. You're watching Spring Global on Westernspring Television. We will be right back after this break.
Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was an anti-apartheid activist who gave his all for the elimination of what has been described as the world's most vicious rule of the unjust and man's inhumanity against man. He was born July 18, 1918 in Mvezo, South Africa. Educated and trained as a successful legal practitioner, he took up the gauntlet of a human activist against segregation by the minority white supremacist in South Africa. At the climax of his trial for treason, orchestrated by the minority South African government, the great crusader for democratic equality was prepared to pay the supreme sacrifice to establish majority rule in his native land. He told white jurists that if achieving freedom for his people was worth his life, he was prepared to die. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island, described as the most notorious prison in the world. It was from this same prison that he came out as a free man to assume office as South Africa's first black president in 1994. Westernspring Television identifies Nelson Mandela as a watershed character in history. Fumilayo Ransom Kuti was an educationist and advocate of women's rights. She was recognized for her vitriolic comments against colonial policy of taxation as it affected the Nigerian women. Bere, as fondly addressed by her women followers, Fumilayo championed the initiation of universal adult suffrage, which gave an unprecedented leeway for women to contest elective offices and power to exercise voting rights. Married to a foremost educationist and teacher, Israel Oladoto Ransom Kuti, the first president of Nigeria Union of Teachers, Fumilayo Ransom Kuti was the mother of children who inherited her spirit of activism. Olufela Abe Ololari, the former, a renowned musical legend. She was the first female student of Abeokuta Grammar School and the first female to own and drive a car in Nigeria. The award recipient of Member of Order of Nigeria MON and Lenin Peace Prize was born on 25th October 1900 and was killed on the 13th April 1978 by rampaging road soldiers in Lagos. Westernspring Television identifies Fumilayo Ransom Kuti as a watershed character in history.
Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us on Spring Global right here on Westernspring Television. Now moving on, Ghana's Judicial Workers Association has called off its indefinite nationwide strike after meeting government officials. The Judicial Service Staff Association of Ghana says the strike is on hold for 2 weeks to allow for engagement and fast-track approval of their salary increase demands. Court activities came to a halt last week Thursday, with all judicial service staff directed not to report to work until President Nana Akufo-Addo approved their demand for new salaries and payment of arrears since January. Ghana's government faces a tough choice as salary increases go against their promise to reduce spending, a condition of the recent International Monetary Fund bailout. Fighting fled again in Sudan today despite the latest ceasefire pledges of the two warring generals meant to allow desperately needed aid to reach besieged civilians. United States and Saudi mediators announced late yesterday that the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces had agreed to extend by 5 days the humanitarian truce they frequently violated over the past week. Since the extension announcement, residents reported clashes with various kinds of weapons in southern Khartoum and fighting in Nyala, South Darfur's state capital. The mediators admitted the truce had been imperfectly observed but said the extension will permit further humanitarian efforts. The war has killed more than 1,800 people according to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. The United Nations said more than 1 million have been internally displaced and nearly 350,000 others have escaped to other countries. Now in Europe, NATO has condemned as totally unacceptable attacks by demonstrators in Kosovo that left at least 30 of its peacemakers injured. Police and NATO troops clashed with Serb protesters in the north where there has been unrest over the installation of ethnic Albanian mayors. Tear gas and stun grenades were used to deter protesters in Svekan after they tried to invade a government building. NATO soldiers also formed a security cordon around 2 other town halls. The crisis dates back to April when Kosovo Serbs boycotted local elections, allowing ethnic Albanians to take control of local councils with a turnout of less than 4%. Both the EU and US have criticized the Kosovan authorities for destabilizing the situation in North Kosovo and warned against any actions that could inflame ethnic tensions there. Kosovo declared independence from Serbia in February 2008 after years of strained relations between its Serb and mainly Albanian inhabitants. Meanwhile, in Asia, protesters have clashed with large numbers of police over the planned demolition of a mosque's dome in a largely Muslim town in Yunnan, China. Social media videos showed crowds outside the 13th century Najiaying Mosque in Nago town on Saturday. Scuffles broke out between police and locals who were surrounded by hundreds of armed officers. Yunnan, an ethnically diverse province in southern China, has a significant Muslim population. Elsewhere, experts, including the heads of OpenAI and Google DeepMind, have warned that artificial intelligence could lead to the extinction of humanity. Dozens have supported a statement published by the webpage of the Center for AI Safety. However, others say the fears are overblown. Sam Altman, chief executive of ChatGPT maker OpenAI, Demis Hassabis, chief executive of Google DeepMind, and Dario Amodei of Anthropic have also supported the statement. Now talking sports, Nigeria Super Falcons will face either Ethiopia or Chad in the second round of the 2024 Paris Olympic football qualifiers. This was announced at the draw for the qualifiers, which was held in Cairo, Egypt. Ethiopia and Chad will face each other in the first round, and the winner over two legs will take on the Super Falcons in the second round. The African qualifiers will kick off in July 2023 and will be concluded in April 2024. Only two women's teams will represent Africa at the football event of the Paris Olympics. The Super Falcons have failed to qualify for the last three Olympic Games in 2012, 2016, and 2020. Their last appearance at the football event at the Games was in 2008 in Beijing, where they crashed out in the group stage. To tennis, Novak Djokovic wrote a political message about Kosovo on a camera lens after beginning his quest for his record 23rd men's Grand Slam singles title with victory at the French Open. Serbia's Djokovic claimed a 6-3, 6-2, 7-6 win over Alexander Kovacevic after beating the American. Djokovic wrote, "Kosovo is the heart of Serbia. Stop the violence." The statement was a reference to recent tension in Kosovo, which declared independence from Serbia in 2008. Serbia has never recognized Kosovo's independence, and there has been violence in the past days following the installation of ethnic Albanian mayors in the north of the country, with the police and NATO troops clashing with Serb protesters. Now, before we end Spring Global, here is a recap of our top stories. An Osun State High Court in Osogbo has sentenced the owner of Hilton Hotel Ile-Ife, Ramon Adedoyin, and two others to death by hanging over the murder case of Timothy Adegoke, a master's student of the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. Russia has accused Ukraine of launching an early morning drone attack on Moscow, the first time the city has been targeted by multiple drones since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. NATO has condemned as totally unacceptable attacks by demonstrators in Kosovo that left at least 30 of its peacekeepers injured. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Westernspring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Westernspring Television. I am Evelyn Ohiola. Many thanks for your time.